Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. At dawn in quiet Sonoma, a vineyard owner spots two strangers prowling his land, claiming authority from a nearby HOA. What starts as a trespass spirals into a battle of surveillance, corruption, and stolen water. One man, one vineyard, and a war they never saw coming. You get used to the quiet out here. Sonoma mornings aren't just calm. They feel earned, like the land knows how many decades of toil and sun it's endured and chooses peace on its own terms. My vineyard sits on 12 acres of rolling soil, surrounded by hills, scattered oaks, and, unfortunately, suburban progress. You'd think that owning land that used to be part of a 19th century homestead would give you a buffer from modern stupidity. You'd be wrong. It was about 5:30 in the morning when I first saw them. Two figures moving between the vine rows, flashlights cutting through the fog like they owned the place. I was halfway into my first cup of coffee, standing on the east edge of the property near the tool shed, checking on a possible leak in the irrigation line. The kind of mindless task I usually enjoy before the world wakes up. They didn't see me at first. One of them, a big guy in tactical boots and a neon vest that read HOA Patrol, was talking into a walkie-talkie while the other knelt down, inspecting something in the dirt like he'd just discovered a bomb under my Merlot vines. I stepped forward slowly, trying to figure out if they were drunk, lost, or just incredibly stupid. "Morning," I said flatly, loud enough to make both of them jump. The big guy turned first, hand drifting instinctively toward his belt, like he expected a confrontation. The other stood up, brushing dirt off his knees and trying to look official. "Sir," said the taller one, nodding. "We're conducting a fire safety inspection under Silver Ridge HOA protocols. Just routine. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes." I stared at him for a second. I wasn't sure if he was joking or if his brain had been replaced with dryer lint. "Fire safety inspection? You're standing in the middle of a private vineyard. You're trespassing." The guy with the walkie-talkie smiled like a telemarketer about to offer me a once-in-a-lifetime deal. "Your property borders the Silver Ridge community, sir. According to our updated Compliance Act, all adjacent landowners must conform to vegetation management standards. There's been a concern about overgrowth." "Oh, has there?" I said. "And who exactly raised that concern?" "We can't disclose that, sir," the second one replied. "But the Fire Buffer Subcommittee voted on it last week." He reached into a plastic file folder and handed me a sheet of paper. It was a Word document. Literally. Silver Ridge Fire Buffer Initiative, in Times New Roman, complete with grammatical errors and a signature line that read, "I kid you not, approved by the committee." No letterhead, no seal, no contact info, just a glorified homework assignment pretending to be legal authority. "Tell you what," I said, "you can take this kindergarten arts and crafts project and shove it right back into whatever HOA binder you dragged it out of. Then you can walk yourselves off my land." That's when the big guy, walkie-talkie dude, got mouthy. "You should cooperate," he said, stepping forward just enough to be stupid. "You wouldn't want us to involve the real authorities." "Oh, please do," I said, smiling for the first time. "In fact, I'll make it easier for you." I pulled out my phone and started recording. The look on his face was priceless, the flicker of recognition that he was being documented, that his fake badge act might not end with him barking orders. I got both of their faces, their names stitched onto their vests, and the footage of them standing on my land like it was the Walmart parking lot. "You'll regret this," the taller one muttered as they turned to leave. "It's a community safety issue." "No," I said. "It's a boundary issue, and you just crossed it." By the time they were halfway across the vineyard, I was already uploading the footage to a shared drive and sending the link to Charlie, an old law school buddy turned civil rights attorney. Guy's made a career out of turning over HOA stones and watching what crawls out. He'd have a field day with this. Back at the house, I dug out the original deed to my property. Not a single mention of Silver Ridge HOA jurisdiction. I'd bought the land directly from the Calderon family who'd owned it since 1893. The HOA had only popped up in the last decade when developers slapped together overpriced Lego houses around the hills and figured no one would notice their creeping sense of entitlement. I drafted a brief incident report, attached the video and GPS coordinates, and submitted it to the Sonoma County Sheriff's online portal. I don't take chances with squatters in uniforms. As the morning burned off the fog, I stood by the fence line and looked at the subdivision in the distance. Identical roofs, fake shutters, lawn gnomes, and all. The HOA had just declared war on the wrong man. They thought I was just a winemaker. They forgot I used to practice land law. I smiled. Let the games begin. I didn't expect the deputy to show up looking like he was about to tee off at a country club. An hour after the Vineyard incident, I was back near the irrigation control box, still trying to calm my pulse and finish what should have been a quiet morning. Instead, a dusty white Ford Explorer with the sheriff's insignia rolled up my drive. Out stepped Deputy John Mercer, 50-something, polished boots, mirrored sunglasses, and the air of a man who enjoyed authority just a bit too much. The moment I saw him, my stomach turned. I recognized him, golf buddy of Terry Grant, the same man who paraded around the Silver Ridge HOA like it was his personal fiefdom. Mercer and Terry used to show up at the same Rotary Club events back when I still practiced. They weren't subtle about their good old boy dynamic. "Morning," he said as he approached, casual and relaxed, like we were about to discuss my wine selection. "Deputy," I said, "here to follow up on my trespassing report." He chuckled. "Well, actually, I'm responding to a community safety concern." "Of course you are." He glanced over my vines, nodded approvingly, like he knew a damn thing about viticulture. "Fire season's early this year. People are nervous." "Let me guess," I said. "Silver Ridge is nervous." Mercer gave a non-committal shrug. "The HOA's been trying to coordinate with adjacent properties. You know, vegetation control, fire breaks, inspections, all that. They sent 2 rent-a-cops onto my land without notice or legal authority," I said, trying hard not to let my voice rise. "That's not coordination, that's trespassing." Mercer raised a hand like a parent humoring a tantrum. "Look, Andrew, I know you're not part of their HOA. No one's forcing anything, but cooperation's good for everyone. Less paperwork, less friction." "Is that a suggestion?" I asked. "Or a threat?" There was a beat. He hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. "Let's just say," he said slowly, "some things are easier when everyone plays ball." I smiled without warmth. "Deputy, you ever read the Civil Code on private property access?" "I've read enough." "Then you know I'm well within my rights. And I've already submitted footage to the sheriff's office and filed a complaint. If anyone else steps on my property without a warrant or court order, I will treat it as criminal trespass, uniform or not." His mouth flattened. "You sure you want to escalate this?" "You think I'm escalating? I woke up to HOA patrols digging through my vineyard, and now you're on my land asking me to roll over for a bunch of bureaucrats in cargo shorts. You tell me who's escalating." He looked past me toward the house, maybe hoping someone, my wife, my kids, a reasonable adult, would come out and talk me down. No one did. It was just me and a long, silent stretch of grapevines. Finally, he nodded. "All right, just do us all a favor and keep the weeds down along the fence line. If something catches fire, it's not just your land at risk." "Noted," I said, and turned my back to him. He lingered a few seconds longer, then walked back to his Explorer and drove off. Slow, deliberate, like he wanted to make sure I saw him leave on his own terms. The moment he was out of sight, I sent Charlie a text. Mercer showed up. Not subtle. Definitely in Terry's pocket. "Time to go nuclear." Charlie responded within 60 seconds. "Start the paper trail. I'm drafting civil demand letters tonight." Good. That evening, I reviewed the footage again and made a clean report of the encounter with Mercer. No direct threats, but enough suggestive language to make it obvious he was there to discourage resistance, not enforce law. I uploaded the new recording to the same encrypted drive I'd shared with Charlie and added notes on Mercer's phrasing. I also decided it was time to notify my insurance provider. If Silver Ridge was willing to play stupid games on my land, I needed to make sure my liability coverage was airtight. I wasn't just worried about property damage. I was worried one of these fake cops would trip on a rake and try to sue me for emotional distress. By nightfall, I had installed motion-sensitive lights along the eastern access trail and started drafting a letter to the Board of Supervisors, requesting clarification on whether Silver Ridge HOA had ever been granted enforcement power outside its boundaries. Spoiler, they hadn't. And just before bed, I set up 2 trail cameras and a microphone near the fence line closest to Silver Ridge. Infrared, audio enabled, and uploading straight to the cloud. They wanted to play surveillance state? Fine, I could play that game too. By the time Charlie got his hands on the documents, he was already grinning like a cat in a birdhouse. "Andrew," he said over the phone, voice crisp and caffeinated, "you're not just dealing with overreach. This thing smells like a full-blown power grab." He wasn't exaggerating. Thanks to a contact of his, a paralegal who used to handle documentation for HOA disputes, we managed to get in touch with a guy named Garrett Shaw, former compliance coordinator for Silver Ridge HOA. Resigned 6 months ago under amicable conditions, which, in bureaucratic speak, usually means something was about to blow up. We met Garrett at a diner off Highway 12. He looked like a man trying hard not to be involved anymore. Nervous hands, eyes that kept checking the door, like HOA commandos were going to rappel in through the ceiling fan. After 2 cups of coffee and some quiet assurances that we weren't about to hang him out to dry, he leaned in and opened a battered manila envelope. What was inside didn't just confirm our suspicions, it detonated them. Internal memos labeled Perimeter Initiative. PowerPoint slides from a private HOA meeting outlining a strategy called Peripheral Compliance Enforcement. Terms like influence soft zones, vegetation leverage, and my personal favorite, normalize jurisdictional perception. They were trying to gradually condition adjacent landowners to act like they were under HOA control. And yes, drones were mentioned multiple times. In fact, one slide described a budget line item for aerial vegetation audits, which I later confirmed is HOA speak for flying tiny robots over someone's land without their consent. "Oh, and this," Garrett added, pulling out a folded site map. "This is what made me quit." It was a diagram of utility lines, specifically water mains. And there it was, a thick red line marked auxiliary line, HOA pressure-fed zone, that cut directly through my vineyard, my land. No easement, no contract, no permission, just a red line pretending to be legitimate. "Was this ever formalized?" I asked. Garrett shook his head. "As far as I know, it was laid when they expanded Phase 3 of Silver Ridge. Some deal between the board and a contractor. It's not on the county records. They knew it wasn't kosher. Charlie was already taking pictures of every document. "We're not dealing with oversight," he muttered. "This is theft." I drove home in a different mood. Up until that point, I'd assumed I was just the victim of overzealous HOA idiocy. Now I knew better. They weren't just trespassing. They were tapping into my water line. My well-fed high-pressure irrigation system, carefully calibrated for the vineyard, was being siphoned off to supply backyard fountains and car washes for people who thought a grapevine was just a hipster salad ingredient. Back at the house, I called my irrigation technician and had him come out that evening. We walked the lines together and tested pressure variances. Sure enough, during peak evening hours and when sprinkler systems in Silver Ridge were humming, my line pressure dropped by 28%. "That's really bad," he said. "You run this uncorrected and you'll have uneven yield and root stress, especially on that east slope." I stood there under the fading sun staring at my vines like I was looking at betrayed soldiers. The next day, I started putting together a formal demand for cease and desist, drafted by Charlie and served via courier to the Silver Ridge HOA office, or more accurately, Terry Grant's home address, because, of course, this HOA office was nothing more than a fancy mailbox and Terry's kitchen printer. While that simmered, I pulled permits and requested a search of the county utilities office. I wanted to know exactly what was filed during the Phase 3 expansion. The clerk, a friendly older woman with a love for procedural chaos, came back an hour later with a flat statement. "There's no legal record of any auxiliary water connections for those parcels. Not through your land, not through anyone's." Of course there isn't. I also began setting up motion-triggered cameras near the suspected water tap points. I wasn't just aiming to sue. I wanted footage, evidence. I was going to build a case so ironclad it could survive a biblical flood. That weekend, I installed a small sign near the old fence gate, just above the buried main line. Nothing dramatic, just a polite little warning in bold white letters. Unauthorized utility access, prohibited by law. Surveillance active. By Monday morning, my inbox held 3 things. A legal threat letter from the HOA accusing me of harassment. A pressure report from my technician showing growing instability in Zone B. And a blurry photo emailed from a blocked address of me working near the water lines with the subject line, "We're watching too." I forwarded it all to Charlie with the note, "It's on." By the time I installed the last camera, I was sweating through my shirt and smiling like a lunatic. The system was beautiful. 8 cameras, all hidden in birdhouses and weatherproof utility boxes, equipped with facial recognition, motion alerts, and infrared night vision. They fed directly into a private server Charlie helped me set up, pinging my phone every time a gopher so much as sneezed. HOA patrols wouldn't get a second chance at sneaking up on me, and I wasn't just watching. I was broadcasting. I clipped together the footage from their first visit. The fake fire inspection, the walkie-talkie threats, Mercer's friendly warning, and the irrigation readings. Then I spliced in Garrett's leaked documents, the drone proposal, the auxiliary water line, a few grainy stills of what looked suspiciously like Terry Grant himself poking around behind my east fence 2 weeks prior. Then I uploaded the whole thing to YouTube under the title, When Your HOA Thinks It Owns You, Vineyard versus Suburbia. It wasn't flashy, just facts, footage, and my voice walking viewers through each violation. By noon, it had over 15,000 views and climbing. Turns out America has a deep, festering hatred for HOA nonsense. Who knew? The comment section was a battlefield. Half the users were demanding HOA reform. The other half were quoting the Constitution like it was a Call of Duty match. And a few offered to bring pitchforks and barbecue if I ever hosted a public tour, which I'll admit was tempting. But while the internet had my back, Silver Ridge was sharpening its teeth. It started with letters, stacks of them. One from the HOA Public Relations Committee, accusing me of inciting community distrust. Another from the Vegetation Oversight Chair, alleging that the tall grass near my perimeter presented a fire hazard endangering children. And my favorite, a cease and desist claiming that my online video constituted defamation with potential for economic harm, because apparently pointing a camera at trespassers and uploading the truth is now slander in HOA land. They even sent one to my wife, addressed to her maiden name, no less, implying she might be held co-liable for community defamation as a co-owner. She laughed so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. "Are they trying to intimidate me?" she asked. Yes. Amateurs, but they weren't done. That week, a local paper, the Sonoma Echo, ran a curious piece in its Community Watch section, headlined, Fire Risk Vineyards. Should adjacent land be held to HOA standards? It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. The article quoted unnamed HOA sources who expressed concern over outdated agricultural irrigation and unmonitored land conditions. It also made mention of previous law enforcement contact and online provocations. All pure bullshit. The piece ran alongside a smiling photo of Terry Grant shaking hands with a county supervisor at a fire preparedness seminar. I called the paper, got transferred 3 times before a junior editor admitted the piece came from a community-submitted press packet. In other words, it was HOA propaganda with a press pass. Fine, I fired back. I sent a rebuttal with supporting documents, footage links, and drone maps to every local paper, wine industry blog, and community Facebook group I could think of. Then I went to the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors and requested a 10-minute speaking slot for the next public meeting. My presentation? Simple. Maps of illegal water taps, footage of unauthorized patrols, a soil survey showing root zone damage from inconsistent pressure, and a screenshot of the HOA's internal memo that literally said, "Normalize jurisdictional perception." I ended with one slide. What happens when private security acts like law enforcement? Who stops them? The room was silent. Then one of the supervisors cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Callwood, we'll be looking into this immediately." Good. About time. That night, I received a hand-delivered envelope. No return address. Inside, another printed memo from the HOA, marked confidential, warning that I was being monitored for continued violations of community harmony expectations. Attached was a blurry photo of me speaking at the meeting. Someone in the room had taken it. I scanned it, added it to the server, and labeled the folder, Paranoia, Phase 2. The next day, Charlie sent over the first formal draft of the civil suit. Count 1, trespassing. Count 2, illegal use of private utility infrastructure. Count 3, defamation and reputational harm. Count 4, intentional interference with business operations. HOA, Terry Grant, the patrol members, and any affiliated parties listed in Garrett's documents. All named. I printed out the last page, signed it, and wrote across the top in Sharpie, "Welcome to Discovery, assholes." If you've never been in a courtroom when someone's entire house of lies starts to collapse, let me tell you, it's better than wine at harvest. We were barely 10 minutes into the preliminary hearing when things started going sideways for Silver Ridge. Terry Grant showed up in his HOA finest, polo shirt, khakis, and a smug expression that said he still thought this was all a misunderstanding I'd eventually apologize for. He sat at the defense table with two lawyers who looked like they were billing by the syllable and regretting every one of them. Charlie, on the other hand, was in full gladiator mode. No tie, sleeves rolled up, binder in hand like it was a weapon. He led with the waterline. "We have pressure logs, aerial maps, historical permits, and engineering assessments," he said to the judge. The irrigation infrastructure belonging to Mr. Callwood was tampered with and tapped by Silver Ridge HOA or its agents without consent, compensation, or legal right. The HOA's lawyers tried to object, but Charlie rolled right over them. "Not only that, Your Honor, but the unauthorized connection resulted in documented crop stress, which threatens the financial viability of a multi-acre agricultural operation. That's not neighborly oversight. That's theft." The judge raised an eyebrow and asked if we had anything showing the connection was made intentionally. That's when Garrett's documents came in. Charlie laid out the site plan. "This is the internal HOA diagram labeling Mr. Callwood's private water main as a pressure-fed auxiliary zone. This was not a mistake. This was policy." That was count one. Theft of resources. Then came the patrols. We played the footage, the fake inspections, the shouting, the veiled threats. The room was silent except for the audio. "You should cooperate or we'll call the real cops." "You're not being a good neighbor." "Community safety is everyone's responsibility." The judge asked flatly, "Do these individuals hold law enforcement certification?" One of the defense attorneys cleared his throat and mumbled something about retired security personnel acting in voluntary capacity. Charlie didn't even look up from his notes. "Your Honor, one of the men in the video, Kyle Grant, is a blood relative of Mr. Terry Grant, the president of the HOA. His security license expired 8 months prior to the incident. The other individual was discharged from law enforcement for excessive force in 2 separate cases. Both were acting under the title HOA Patrol, with no municipal authority and no legal permission to enter private land." Terry shifted in his seat. That was count 2. Criminal trespass and impersonation of authority. Then came the fun part. We presented a building inspector's affidavit showing that 3 homes on the edge of Silver Ridge were constructed partially within a restricted floodplain buffer zone, an area clearly marked as non-developable in zoning maps. The homes were connected to the very water line illegally routed through my vineyard. The room turned colder. The judge leaned forward. "Are you alleging improper zoning approvals?" Charlie nodded. "We're not just alleging, Your Honor. We're documenting a pattern of behavior, a culture of deliberate disregard for property rights, environmental limits, and regulatory compliance, all in the name of expansion." The defense tried to derail, arguing that zoning wasn't relevant to my claim, but the judge cut them off. "If part of your HOA's foundation rests on unlawful construction and unauthorized utility access," he said, "it's absolutely relevant." That was count 3, systemic abuse of regulatory processes. And finally, the retaliation. Charlie presented the press clippings, the anonymous letters, the blurry photos sent to my inbox, and the HOA meeting notes referencing me by name under the heading Community Disruption Management. The defense claimed I was just a loud neighbor stirring up drama. Charlie, without missing a beat, replied, "He's a vineyard owner with property outside your jurisdiction. You're not his HOA. You're barely a homeowners association at this point. You're a cartel with newsletters." I almost laughed out loud. That was count 4. Reputational damage and intentional interference. The judge adjourned for the day, but not before stating that the court would move forward with a full evidentiary hearing. HOA's motion to dismiss denied. Back in the hallway, Terry tried to act casual, like the walls weren't closing in. He walked past me and muttered, "You think this is over?" I didn't even look at him. "No," I said. "I think it's just getting good." Some people crack under pressure. Terry Grant, it turned out, shattered. It didn't happen all at once. Like any slow-motion collapse, it started with a tremor. a line in a deposition that didn't match a financial record, then a second contradiction, a minor lie, a missing receipt. But the real quake hit when Kyle Grant, Terry's nephew, self-declared patrolman and expired security hack, got caught in his own testimony. They brought Kyle back in for a follow-up interview after the hearing. He tried to act tough, sunglasses on indoors, sleeves rolled up like he'd just finished lifting something heavier than HOA paperwork. Under oath, he insisted that he hadn't been paid for his patrol work, that he was volunteering to help community stability. But when the DA's assistant cross-checked his Venmo history, guess what showed up? Weekly payments labeled Site Audit from an account tied to a company called Clearwater Utility Solutions, the same Clearwater that, surprise, had been contracted to manage water infrastructure for Silver Ridge during their Phase 3 expansion. The same Clearwater that, according to zoning documents Charlie dug up, had 0 county permits for laying water lines through my land. It gets better. Charlie subpoenaed the full payment ledger from Clearwater. Turns out over the past 18 months, the company had been funneling money to consultants linked to the HOA board. Not just Kyle, but 2 other committee members, one of whom had conveniently resigned just before the zoning scandal hit the docket. The total amount, more than $72,000 in consulting fees. At this point, it wasn't just about trespassing or illegal water taps. We were staring down the barrel of a corruption scheme. One that involved fake inspections, hush money, and misuse of public infrastructure for private neighborhood expansion. I'll never forget the look on the prosecutor's face when Charlie dropped the final document, an email from Terry Grant to Clearwater labeled Buffer Enforcement Coordination. In it, Terry outlined a plan to expand influence through informal patrols and water access leverage, suggested kickbacks for compliant participation, and closed with, "We need pressure, not paperwork." That quote alone became the tagline of the entire case. By that evening, Terry's home was under search warrant. The county sheriff's office, the real one, not the HOA cosplay squad, raided his property and seized his laptop, financial records, and a whole file cabinet labeled Community Ops. You could practically hear the HOA board shitting bricks. News broke the next morning. Sonoma HOA under investigation for fraud, unauthorized utilities, and illegal surveillance. Photos of Terry being let out in cuffs made it to the local paper's front page. And the comment section on my YouTube video doubled in size overnight. But I wasn't gloating. Not yet. Because I knew how systems like this worked. HOAs don't crumble quietly. They claw, stall, beg, threaten. And Silver Ridge still had board members, lawyers, and neighbors who'd rather sink the entire vineyard than admit their precious community was built on a lie. Meanwhile, other landowners started reaching out. At first, it was cautious emails. Then, full calls. One man named Jack lived on a 6-acre parcel just west of me. Said his family had been getting weird notices from Silver Ridge for years, threats about exterior compliance and easement misunderstandings. Another woman farther up the ridge discovered that her stormwater runoff had been redirected during Silver Ridge's development, flooding her orchard. Charlie set up a group chat. Within 48 hours, we had 3 new plaintiffs preparing to file their own suits, all stemming from HOA overreach, illegal land use, and utility abuse. This wasn't just about my vineyard anymore. It was a chain reaction. One HOA, multiple properties, coordinated manipulation. Back in court, the judge ordered a forensic audit of all HOA expenditures over the past 5 years. And when the preliminary review showed over $200,000 unaccounted for, the civil suit got upgraded with criminal allegations, fraud, embezzlement, wire abuse. They even froze the HOA's operating account. That meant no patrols, no landscaping, no bullshit newsletter with tips on neighborly behavior, just silence, subpoenas, and a steadily unraveling empire. Terry, meanwhile, sat in county jail awaiting arraignment. His lawyers tried to argue health complications, stress, misunderstandings, but the paper trail didn't stutter. It screamed. They thought they could drown a vineyard in bureaucracy. Instead, they planted the seeds of their own damn prosecution. There's a certain silence you only hear when a system dies. It settled over Silver Ridge like a fog after a storm. No patrols, no flyers in mailboxes, no HOA courtesy visits. The golf cart that once cruised the outer roads with hazard lights and clipboards hadn't been seen in days. Even the neighborhood Facebook group went dark. When people start scrubbing group posts and profile photos vanish, you know they're lawyering up. On my end, I was installing new signage. Not decorative, not friendly. Big aluminum signs drilled into steel posts with industrial bolts. Black letters on white. Private property. No HOA access. Trespassers will be recorded and prosecuted. Security armed and active. I didn't need to bluff. The trail cameras had already picked up 2 familiar faces scoping the fence line at dusk. One of them was the same guy who'd threatened to call the real cops in my vineyard. He saw the blinking red light and took off through the tree line like a deer in hunting season. By the time Terry Grant stood before a judge for arraignment, the case had a life of its own. 3 felony counts: fraudulent misuse of funds, unlawful surveillance and data collection, conspiracy to commit infrastructure tampering. The courtroom was packed, not just journalists and local activists, but also neighbors, former allies of Terry now pretending they barely knew him. HOA board members looked like corporate ghosts, hollow, pale, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The prosecution presented financial records linking Clearwater Utility Solutions directly to HOA expenditures, unauthorized invoices, payments for site consulting, surveillance equipment, even aerial drone footage purchases billed as topography mapping. The kicker: none of it was disclosed in annual community reports. Worse still, the pressure test on my vineyard's irrigation system confirmed long-term damage to root zones in the southern slope. Agricultural losses, water strain, economic impact. Terry's attorney argued that community stewardship had been misinterpreted as conspiracy. The judge didn't buy it. Bail denied. That same week, the county issued an emergency ruling. The HOA's legal authority was suspended pending outcome of litigation. All enforcement actions ceased, patrols permanently disbanded, new elections ordered within 72 hours. A new interim board was sworn in, led by Lauren Blair, a compliance attorney and longtime critic of the old regime. She walked into her first HOA meeting with a binder of documents and one simple promise: no more fake laws, no more patrols, and no more playing sheriff in a suburb. We met a week later on neutral ground, the edge of my vineyard. "I want a truce," she said, and I want it in writing. We hashed out a binding non-interference agreement. Silver Ridge HOA acknowledged my land as wholly outside its jurisdiction. No inspections, notices, communications, or actions permitted without formal request and my consent. Compensation paid for infrastructure damages totaling $620,000 plus coverage for irrigation reconstruction. In return, I agreed not to pursue further damages for now. It wasn't forgiveness. It was containment. And it marked the end of HOA's reach beyond their gates. Meanwhile, the media attention hit a second wind. The headline that stuck came from the Press Democrat. The HOA that tried to annex a vineyard and got sued into oblivion. I started getting invitations, local podcasts, homeowners groups, even one state rep who wanted to chat about HOA overreach at scale. I said yes to some, ignored most. I didn't want to be the face of anti-HOA America. I just wanted my water pressure back. Still, I couldn't deny the shift. People started seeing fences not as barriers but as shields. They read the zoning laws they used to ignore. They asked questions, and in the homes of Silver Ridge, people who once cheered the patrols now pretended they'd never liked Terry at all. Funny how quickly loyalty evaporates when the subpoenas arrive. Some mornings, the fog still rolls in thick and low, curling around the vines like an old cat settling in your lap. But now, when I walk the vineyard, I do it knowing the land breathes freely again, not watched, not judged, not whispered about by bureaucrats with clipboards and delusions of empire. The new irrigation system hums with perfect balance. My grapes survived the pressure war, barely, and we even saved most of the southern slope. The yield won't be record-breaking this year, but it'll be honest. And more importantly, mine. Lauren Blair came through. She may have been part of the same neighborhood, but she knew exactly how close Silver Ridge had come to becoming a cautionary tale with a criminal record. Under her interim leadership, the board ratified the non-interference agreement unanimously. She even showed up in person with the first installment of the settlement check, one of those oversized novelty checks they usually use on game shows. "Figured you'd enjoy the visual," she said. I told her I did. The new HOA website dropped all mention of extended community standards and patrol initiatives. A public apology was posted, buried in the news section, bland and vague, but it was there. and they quietly updated their internal policy. No interaction with non-member properties unless legally required. In other words, leave people the hell alone. Terry Grant pled out 8 years minimum for document fraud, infrastructure tampering, and conspiracy. No parole for the first 4. His nephew Kyle took a deal and flipped on half the HOA board in exchange for immunity. Clearwater Utility Solutions dissolved entirely, with 3 former executives facing their own civil actions. Meanwhile, the civil suit snowballed. With precedent on the books and court findings in hand, we helped coordinate 5 additional lawsuits by surrounding landowners. One of them, Jack, the guy with the orchard, ended up with a payout bigger than mine after it was revealed the HOA diverted storm drains directly through his easement, flooding half an acre. The best part, my case is now being cited in zoning workshops across the county. Callwood vs. Silver Ridge HOA has a nice ring to it. My oldest kid, Ellie, started asking more questions about land law. She's 15, thinks lawyers are annoying, but kinda badass when they crush people. My wife just rolls her eyes. We both know exactly where Ellie gets it from. A few days ago, I hosted a small tasting, just 20 people. Neighbors, friends, a couple of local reporters. I set up a long table under the oak trees, cracked open a few bottles from last season, and let the vineyard speak for itself. Halfway through the evening, someone raised a glass and said, "Here's to standing your ground." I didn't say anything, just raised my glass back. Because here's the thing, this wasn't just about grapes or pipes or bylaws. It was about control. Who gets to tell you how to live? Who draws the line? And what happens when someone dares to redraw it? So now, when tourists ask me why there's a metal sign at the gate that says, "Private property, HOA free zone, trespassers will be vintaged," I just smile, because it's not a joke. It's a promise.